Hi and welcome. I'm Annette Oltmans, founder and CEO of the MEND Project. In this workshop titled Playing the Victim, How Abusers Flip the Script, we will have a discussion on what it looks like for the abuser to actually play the victim in the situation or to flip things around on you, why they do it, and the excuses they use. We'll also uncover the impact on the one being harmed and how to respond when this tactic is being used. So please join us for this impactful conversation to help propel you into your journey today. Okay, so let's get started. Playing the victim, how abusers flip the script. I just want to validate you because it's so unnerving and so unfair when you raise a reasonable complaint, a concern, or a hurt, and the script gets flipped around on you and suddenly you're on the defensive. That's really activating in anxiety and trauma. And it causes you to second guess your reality. So I want to validate you for all you've experienced. It's so unnerving. And I just want you to feel our compassion. But we're going to give you some tools. Even the most subtle forms of emotional abuse are destructive to relationships and families. Abuse is also destructive to your internal psyche. In other words, how you view yourself, what you think about yourself, and how you speak to yourself. Many of you have deep feelings of self-doubt, and you may feel that nothing you do in this relationship is good enough. Or maybe you feel immense guilt or shame when you attempt to talk to your partner about your concerns or your hurts. Excuse me. Suddenly, then the problem is turned around on you, and you're told, you're such a nag, or you're always complaining about something. Nothing I do makes you happy. Or maybe they flip the script in ways that cause you to second guess the narrative as a whole. Like, did I get that wrong? Am I not remembering correctly? Your partner doesn't comfort you or listen attentively. You receive condemnation and even punishment when the offender claims to have been victimized. So there's all this guilt being projected onto you. And it's when you don't have a person who's supposed to be emotionally safe in your life, validating your experiences, it causes you to really have to be strong and stand on your own. And that's really hard to do when you have someone that you believe the best in who's undermining that for you. So it causes you to feel out of sorts and what's the word I'm trying to think of? I can't think of it right now. It's not just confusion, but it's more than that. So it's so important to recognize the patterns of manipulative behaviors that your offender is using against you. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But what does playing the victim look like really? How does it manifest? One is in denying responsibility. Abusers will say and do just about anything to avoid responsibility and accountability, even on what might seem to you the most minor of things. They're defensive. So statements like, you're overreacting, or I didn't do that, or you're gaslighting me, because they will actually use terms that you use to reverse the script and manipulate you, which makes it even more confusing. We really want you to learn the terms and definitions, not to educate your partner, but to be well prepared for the common tactics the offender uses on you. And so by being prepared, you won't be blindsided when those behaviors come at you. Let me just stop for a second. You can find our terms and definitions if you go to our website and then click on Tools and Resources. You'll be asked to insert your email address, and then a window will open up for you that shows you our courses and some wonderful tools that we have in that section, like the terms and definitions, like the maze of confusion, and other tools that show you in simple terms simplifies a lot of complicated topics. And so when you have that visual tool to partner with what you've seen on video or that you've read, it really helps you retain the information. So I really want you to learn the terms and definitions, because the more familiar you become with them, the more prepared you will be you'll be able to identify, you can circle them. Oh, my partner does this all the time, and they do that, and they do this. And then you start really understanding those terms and maybe looking at your journals and seeing how they've used those behaviors so that you are not blindsided. Because part of what happens when they flip the script is it kind of knocks you off your feet or pulls the rug out from under you, and you don't know what's up or down. You are suddenly overwhelmed with confusion and self-doubt. And we want you to be standing on solid ground, really understanding what's happening, so you can just say, oh, he or she is doing that again, and I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to let this change the narrative in my mind. I know what actually happened, and that's my truth, and I'm holding on to that. So it just gives you a more solid footing. You can actually have a response prepared in advance. So once you realize the behaviors they employ against you, you can write down responses and hide them in a safe place so that you can look at them periodically throughout the day and start to memorize how you're going to respond. When you're traumatized or when you're overactivated and dysregulated or deregulated, it's hard to think up things for the first time. So if you prepare, then you'll be more able to respond. So you might say, I won't talk to you when you're in that tone of voice, and then walk away and maybe even lock the bedroom door. The point is to disengage emotionally. Your partner is not emotionally safe. So I don't want you to share your feelings. I don't want you to share your thoughts about the relationships or your vulnerabilities, especially, because they'll just flip the script, play the victim, and use your vulnerabilities against you in a later conversation. They'll exploit your vulnerabilities. These people are not emotionally safe. And until you decide what your plan is to do long-term, the most important thing is to disengage. So now I just want to talk a little bit about shifting the blame, or what we call blame shifting. Many terms in our definition sheet are ways that they avoid responsibility for their words and actions and blame you for them. So it could be they joked about a body part of yours or your bad cooking, and you say, that was unkind. I don't like it when you joke at my expense. And then they tell you, manipulative. There's a term that you should know about, so you can Google it and read about it. It's called DARVO. The acronym is DARVO, DARVO, and it stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim with the offender. This is what they do. They flip the script. They become the victim and you become the offender. They also may catastrophize, blow things out of proportion, and you said just something small, and then they escalate the situation and make it into a giant problem. Or in catastrophizing, they might say, well, you don't want to be married to me, or you don't respect me. And they'll blow it out of proportion in those ways to where suddenly you're on the defensive. They also will minimize you. What you value and what your concerns are will be devalued, will be minimized. That's no big deal. And so many other statements that they can say, but just be aware of minimization, because that's one way that they become the victim by making what you value, what your concerns are, things that are important to you, they will make them unimportant. Okay. Also, you may experience blanket contempt or accusations such as, you're the cause of all of our problems. So there's this kind of undercurrent of anger and disapproval towards you that you sense. It's not like they're joyously celebrating you and your life and your interests. There's a ready critic in their psyche that's ready to pounce on you, that's ready to blame you. And basically it's almost like disdain. Contempt is really it's more like they are the jury, the judge, and the executioner. They decide your guilt or innocence, and they then enact the punishment. It's some form of retaliation. Okay, the other element to consider is reversing roles. Claims like, I'm the real victim here, you're an abuser. I want you to know, if your partner has not said this yet, it is very common by offenders that they will claim to be being abused by you. If they haven't used it yet, you need to know that when you begin to enforce boundaries, or you separate, or you file for divorce, they are very likely to claim that you're the abuser. Sometimes I think they believe it. And other times I think it's just so deviant that they are intentionally trying to set you up so that they don't have to pay alimony, or because in some states, if the person earning the money is abused by the other person, they can get out of alimony. There's so many other legal reasons why they do this. One is to establish with law enforcement that you're the abuser. So they may tape record you when you're reacting. I'm sure some of you feel that you react to abuse in ways that isn't normal to your character just because you're so triggered. It's actually an involuntary trauma response, but they're likely to tape record you in those moments and then take it to police when things get really heated and have it documented that you are the abusive one. So if your spouse does something like breaks things in the house or assaults you or rages at you and blocks you in a room, or road rage, like they're driving crazy and erratically and you're in the car, I highly recommend that you have the courage to call 911 and record them in action. It's not like they're going to go to jail forever, but you're going to document in court that they are the abuser and you are the victim. And it's so important to get that established first. So I just want you to be prepared. You might think, no, my person would never do that to me, but I've seen it happen thousands of times. The other thing they do is they inflict guilt, using guilt to manipulate and control you. It might be that they make you feel guilt about your close family relationships or those you have with friends. You spend too much time with them. You share more with them than you do with me. I don't like it when you see them because then you act this way. Or they try to make you feel guilty for spending too much money on necessities while they spend money on items for themselves or items that are not within your budget. It's a way to control and manipulate you. They enjoy making you feel guilty because it allows them to power over you and to control. It's actually a form of coercive control where they control who you spend time with. They control how much money you spend. Now, I'm not talking about a reasonable person in the household who manages the budget and pays the bills and is responsible. And so everyone has their allowance and their limits about what the budget is. Something reasonable like that is one thing, but you need to know about your finances to know if you're being financially abused or manipulated. And take note of that. It's very scary because oftentimes they'll have their names on accounts and things. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but they use guilt to manipulate you. They might even say, you don't understand money, so I'm going to handle all of this. So you feel like you're less than, you feel guilty for not performing, but it's really just a method to control you. They may use past hardships that they have. So like I see this very often, they'll justify current abusive behavior by referencing past traumas. Past traumas might explain how, a low emotional IQ, or it might explain a lack of coping skills, but it does not excuse abuse. Please understand that abuse is always a choice. It's not an accident, and it's never the victim's fault. Past traumas might be an explanation for some of the behaviors, but it is not an excuse for abusing you. They are adults. They have the responsibility to get the help they need, or to read the numerous books to get them help if they can't afford a therapist, or to listen to podcasts about healing from trauma. They have a responsibility to be proactive, and they need to take responsibility over themselves rather than this whole blame shifting, playing the victim thing, making you responsible for their behaviors because of their past traumas. That is a big distortion, and I just want you to be aware of that. So for those of you who are struggling with reactive abuse, or what I prefer to call reactive defense, it's not your fault. These things are all very triggering. You've experienced months or years of recurring trauma from the offender. And that said, it's critically important that you find the help you need to overcome your involuntary responses of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. If fighting back is a typical response for you, be warned, because the offender may tape record you during an outburst, like I mentioned earlier, and use it as evidentiary information in court to label you the true abuser. I have tremendous compassion for those that are stuck in the state of reactive abuse or reactive defense. And it's fully explainable because you're in the midst of recurring trauma and you hardly have a chance to recover from the past trauma when the next one comes. But you need to be aware of this in your body and your mind and get the help that you need so that you can control some of your reactions and start to emotionally disengage, to not feel the need. I fought back. I mean, there were times that flight and fawn were part of my MO, but I mostly fought back because I'm like this truth justice person. And so I sometimes remember feeling that I could not stop my reaction. I would tell myself cerebrally, don't react, go for a walk around the block, take a deep breath. And sometimes I just couldn't do it. It's like it was this overwhelming need to respond right away, which is not in your best interest. So someone displaying outbursts of anger or frustration because they are a victim of abuse carries very different motives than those of the offender. You are not trying to power over and control them. You are simply trying to be heard, trying to have justice, trying to stop oppression and maltreatment. So they're very different motives. So I don't want you to get stuck being labeled incorrectly by law enforcement or anything. So I just want you to be really aware, and also aware that if you're in couples therapy, which I don't recommend if there's an offender of any type of abuse, but if you are and you're reacting, the therapist is going to blame you equally and hold you mutually responsible, which is not fair, because for any problems to be resolved, the abuse needs to be resolved first. Okay, moving on. Covert tactics Abusers will say and do just about anything to avoid responsibility and accountability, as I said. They aim to have power over you and to control you. The common thread in every relational abuse case is covert emotional abuse. So I'm talking about a case of sexual harassment in the workplace, child molestation, domestic violence, any kind of relational abuse, excluding, a one-time physical or sexual assault by a stranger. That's not relational. If there's a relationship, they're using covert emotional abuse. And covert, you'll experience covert forms of manipulation that include coercive control, intimidation, and the numerous behaviors outlined on your terms and definitions sheet in our tools and resources section on our website. So I mentioned DARVO. I just want to mention it again because I really want you to look it up. We don't have it on our terms and definitions yet, but we need to add that because remember, it's deny, attack, and reverse roles between the victim and the offender. And it's something that they do all the time. And so I want you to get really familiar with it. Okay, right now I want to just pause for comments or questions, and then I'll continue. Do we have any comments or questions, Jill?
Annette, it is probably I'm smiling because I'm like, should we stop? It is the fullest chat I've ever seen. So we have so many questions in the Q&A box. So thank you so much for utilizing that because
we're hitting a chord. This is a very real situation.
It's very real. And so I just want you to know, Annette, because I know it's difficult for you to see this on your screen right now, because there's so much going on. But this chat is so full. And I just want to let you know they're all connecting with each other in the chat.
Oh, good.
Validating each other and also affirming everything that you're saying with 100%. And this is exactly what happened. Amen. Same. And so I wanted you to know there's definitely a lot of connection to what you're saying here. We have a lot of questions. So I do want to just ask you one because, and then I think it'd be best to probably save it because there are so many. But I wanted to ask you one that came in. Can you expand on why you don't suggest joint counseling?
Yes, absolutely. Because most therapists are not trained to recognize emotional abuse. They don't even know what the term covert emotional abuse means. So even expert abuse therapists won't do couples counseling. They will do an assessment where they interview one partner, then they interview the other partner, and then they do a mutual interview. And then they deduce who the victim and who the abuser is. And they put the abuser into a group program and one-on-one counseling every week. And they require that the abuser sign a release allowing them to speak to the victim. And they may not label the person an abuser or a victim just because it might be too confrontational at the early stages of therapy. But oftentimes they do label it and say, you have a problem. These are emotionally abusive behaviors, and you don't understand that they qualify as abuse. And so I'm recommending that you enter this group program. But basically what I'm saying is by signing a release, they allow the victim to speak into the offender's therapist. So I remember when I went through this, it was really, my husband went through this program, but each week I would send a very short email that said, this is what happened this week. This is my perspective. This is his perspective. Just want you to be aware. And then I would get validated. The therapist would write me back and say, you're absolutely right. You have the right perspective, and I will confront this in real time in our next appointment. So things got handled it. It's a very different way than how couples therapy operates, where you have a therapist who says, well, I'm not going to take sides. This is a mutual problem. It's a relationship. You each have some parts you're responsible for. But see, even if they only give the victim 10% of the responsibility, the abuser views that 10% as though it's 100% of the problem. So you just get blamed and undermined, and you don't get the kind of steadfast support from the therapist that you really need, and that is required to confront offender behaviors. They need a hard confrontation. They need support in their efforts to change, but they need confrontation. And most therapists don't even know how to identify when all the manipulative tactics are playing out in the therapeutic session, let alone have a willingness to want to confront them and separate the two. So in a nutshell, that's what I say. But you can also go to our blog articles and learn about why couples therapy doesn't work, where I break it down even more. Okay, maybe I should take one more question, Jill.
And I want to tell you a couple things. First is we probably have like 30 to 60 minutes of questions.
Oh, wow.
That's what I want to make sure you realize, that there are a lot here. But then
let me try to go through these quickly.
Yeah. And I also want you to just address one more quick thing, because several people have asked this. One is dealing with this situation with a sibling. And another person asked, when you're dealing with parents, it's a hard dynamic. And are there different tools you would use for a parent versus a partner? So I don't know if you can touch on that real quick.
Yeah. Well, it depends on if you are dependent on your parents. That puts you in a really tough situation because you're not in full control. They're managing the purse strings. So in that case, if you're not in control of your life, I would say try to emotionally disengage. Just try to, realize they're not going to meet you where you are emotionally. They're not going to validate you. They don't even have the capacity. They are going to flip the script around on you. So why enter into that conversation? You cannot change them. So it's best to just emotionally limit your contact, limit the depth of your conversations. Keep it just superficial, pleasantries, and nothing more. Try to avoid them. Try to be out of the house as much as possible. Try to get your own income stream going so that you can be less dependent on them. Really distance yourself. And I wouldn't tell them that. I would just start to do it and just talk about things that you know are not controversial. Don't bring your needs, your concerns, your hurts to them. They're not going to meet you where you are. Take those needs and hurts to a trusted friend or a therapist, somebody you can confide in who's fully aligned with you and who will support you. Okay, let's say you're a child and you're not financially dependent on your parents. It's perfectly okay. This is a decision for you to make. You can either just do what I just recommended, which is to emotionally disengage and limit your time with them, limit your conversations, keep everything superficial. Or you can maybe choose that you're going to confront their abusive attitudes and you lay it out for them in a very clear and concise way. The fewer words that you communicate, the better. You might want to write down, these are the behaviors that I will no longer accept from you, or I am going to distance myself from you and limit contact. And so you just articulate what those behaviors are and you present it to them, whether it's in writing or in person, or you read it to them, and you just set your boundaries. But then it's important to follow through. If you're going to set a boundary, then you need to follow through with the consequence if they don't comply. If you're not ready to set that kind of a boundary where you're going to detach physically and emotionally from them, you can take baby steps into the boundary by saying, I don't like when you do this, and I don't like when you do that. And I don't like when you do this. I want you to stop doing that, or I'm going to just walk away from the conversation. You can, like, that's a baby step of a boundary. So I hope that gives you some ideas. Okay, so I think I should move on.
Yes.
Jill, do you agree?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. So why do abusers do this? I mentioned to avoid accountability and responsibility. They want to deflect responsibility for their actions. They are so uncomfortable with the focus being on them. They go to this place of shame, and it also disrupts their ability to power over and control you. They want to be the dominant person who decides the direction of the relationship, who decides the narrative. And they believe they're justified in doing this for a lot of reasons that we don't have time to get into today. They like to create confusion and self-doubt in you. They want to make the victim question their reality, making arguments so confusing and crazy making that you can hardly recall what started the argument in the first place. I mean, how many of you have been in an argument, or you didn't want to argue, you just wanted to raise a hurt, a concern, or a reasonable matter that you are complaining about? And yes, you are allowed to complain. And you raise this in a reasonable way. And the next thing you know, the conversation is taking so many twists and turns that you honestly cannot remember what started the argument in the first place. All you needed was a 5-minute conversation where they say, oh, I hear what you're saying. I understand that. Okay, honey, I won't do that again, or I'll be careful to not talk about that in front of our children or something. It should just be a 5-minute conversation, but instead it turns into this 2-hour or day-long knockdown, drag out situation where they're minimizing and discounting everything you say, and you're desperately investing yourself to try to make them understand. You're trying every which way under the sun to reach them, because your motivation is to have emotional connectedness, emotional safety. And most conflicts are an opportunity to increase emotional connection. But an offender's mindset is to power over, control, and be defensive, to shut down emotions. They're uncomfortable with emotions, and they just want to power over. So they're going to throw any defense out there. In one conversation, you could have 10 or 12 of those covert, emotionally abusive behaviors thrown at you. So you don't even know. You can't recall what started the argument. There's so many twists and turns. So another reason to really learn the terms and definitions. They want to control the narrative. They want to keep the focus on the victim's supposed misdeeds instead of the offender's abuse, gaslighting you, blame shifting you, and minimizing your value and your reasonable need to have a conversation. They will manipulate empathy. So you are the empathic person. They're going to exploit your compassion in order for them to maintain control. They instinctively know that you are willing to self-reflect, take responsibility for your part, and to show them kindness and care. That is what you do. Even if you get angry, in general, though, you are kind, you're responsible, you're willing to self-reflect. You're probably self-reflecting too much, trying to look for things that you can do differently to make the relationship better, things that you may be at fault for, wondering if you're lovable, wondering if something is intrinsically wrong with you, taking on more responsibility than what you're responsible for. So you're over-functioning while they use your empathic nature to keep you downgraded in the relationship. They know you're willing to say, I'm sorry, but they don't have empathy for you. They aren't connected with emotions enough to be able to feel empathy. So they see you as a tool in their toolbox to lift them up and to keep them in power. They want you to comply. They want you to take responsibility for all the wrongs in your communications. There's so much more to this that you would gain from taking our online self-paced course. It's called Finding Clarity. And there's more to the title, but you can find it on our tools and resources page, and it will give you a comprehensive education about all these dynamics and nuances that you'll feel so clear and empowered after completing the course. Okay, common excuses used by abusers. You made me do it. Nothing I do makes you happy. You're too sensitive. I've said that. You're so ungrateful. You complain too much. They might even say, I don't complain about you. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're more of an avoidant narcissist. So you're trying to reach them emotionally, and you raise your complaints about their behaviors, which are mostly passive aggressive. And then they turn around and say, well, I don't complain about you, as though that has anything to do with what the complaint that you raised. It's just a diversion to make you responsible. They will minimize the abuse. It wasn't that bad. Or my family operated this way for my entire life, and they're all fine. You're hypercritical and hypersensitive. It's all you. Those are just some examples, but there's a million of examples of how they will play this out. They externalize responsibility. So they will blame it on something else. I was drunk, or I was high, or you made me angry. That's why I said those things. You must know I don't mean everything I say. Even though what they said was incredibly hurtful, maybe they really used a low blow, like addressing your past vulnerabilities or traumas, and said it never happened, and they don't believe you or something. I mean, I've seen like the depths that they will go to not take responsibility can be really unnerving and harsh for you to experience. Or they might say, I'm going through a lot of stress at work, so give me a break. Or I have a lot of other things going on, so I'm not available to talk to you this week. It's like everything else is important in their life except you. You're the low man on the totem pole. Or, you have so many demands that I can't remember the promises I made. Maybe they promised to change a certain behavior that has been injuring you, and they keep breaking that promise. They may just say, you have so many demands that I can't remember. But there's no excuse for breaking promises. They need to be intentional about changing their behavior if it's harmful. And you'll see how they'll use excuses to avoid responsibility and accountability. They might claim a loss of control. I couldn't help myself. You provoked me. When you don't do what I ask, I admit I get a temper, but it's up to you to accommodate my moods. They might not say those words, that it's up to you to accommodate my moods. They might say something like, you should know how it goes and avoid creating chaos, but you instigate chaos. So they might blame you, even though it's their reaction that is creating the chaos. Nothing more than that. They'll use a past trauma as justification. I mentioned this just a little bit ago. They'll use a past trauma to justify all their abusive actions. They take no responsibility for getting the healing they need, or simply they're going to manipulate you with excuses like, I had a rough childhood. At least I don't physically abuse you. My father physically and emotionally abused me, and you should be glad to know that I'll never hit you. But emotional abuse can be as harmful as physical abuse, and many victims will say it's even more harmful than physical abuse, because of how confusing it is and how undermining it is, and how it causes you to doubt yourself and to lose your voice and to have to become smaller and smaller in the relationship. So there's no excuse, but they'll use them. They'll use persistent victimhood narratives, like they might continually recount stories of being wronged to justify their behavior and elicit your sympathy. Or you might have an offender that's really irresponsible, or doesn't work. They're really lazy and it's always someone else's fault. They don't accept responsibility for their repeated choices. They're not proactive and assertive to maybe re-educate themselves in a new field, or to open the mail and make sure the bills are paid on time. They just leave it all up to you, the chores, the financial responsibility, so many other aspects of daily living. And they're basically, slugs that don't do anything. And it's still your fault. You didn't do enough. I have pain all the time, and you didn't make my doctor's appointments. I mean, they just literally lay it all at your feet. This is just another example of where they're in this persistent victimhood narrative. So the impact on survivors, I have to go fast. Oh my goodness. You have a delayed recognition of abuse. You may not realize that you're being abused right in the moment. And so you're likely to feel really confused. And then a few days later, you might still be thinking about what happened. You'll notice it feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. So it can be very instrumental to journal and document things, because then when you leave it right then and you come back to it later with fresh eyes. The other reason that this is impactful to you is that prolonged exposure to harm, when you experience the abuser continually justifying their behaviors, you have a hard time understanding or picking up on the fact that the offender has an entirely different worldview regarding how relationships should function. Therefore, you're unsuspecting that all their justifications are merely lies or false excuses without merit. You're thinking the best in them. Like, I married this person and they're supposed to have my best interests in mind. The last thing that enters your mind is that you're dealing with somebody who is abusive. So you're more likely to believe the best in your partner and think, what is wrong with me? What could I do better? And you overfunction, you overwork to make everything better, missing what the offender's true motives and deliberate actions are about. There's also the impact of an erosion of your self-esteem and your autonomy. You may feel powerless and doubt yourselves after being put down and told you're the one at fault for so many times. You also feel responsible beyond what you're truly responsible for, and for helping your partner in oftentimes a codependent way. And we need to realize that we are not helpless. We need to listen to our body's cues. When we feel anxiety or we feel like something's off, we need to pay more attention to what our body is telling us, because we are coming from a place of cognitive dissonance, where what that means is you're actually gaslighting yourself. You're not looking at the situation accurately and responding according to that accurate information. You are believing the best in them, wondering what you did wrong when it wasn't your fault. So it's called cognitive dissonance, and you need to gain proficiency in dealing with and distancing yourself and disengaging from an abusive spouse. You are worthy of consistent kindness, love, and respect. And you can learn to take better care of yourself and disengage from toxic conversations. We all can reclaim our self-worth. Nothing we say or do is going to change our partner. You might be able to change the dance a little bit by learning really firm boundaries and building up your core belief in yourself. But you have to want to do the work yourself, and the abuser has to want to do the work themselves to change. A counterpoint to that point is that you can influence their motivation for change by setting really firm boundaries, like maybe a separation or moving into a different bedroom. You can help motivate them to the fact that they need to change, but you can't make them do the work of change. And it takes a lot of work to unpack all their faulty thinking patterns and beliefs about relationships for that to happen. I mentioned emotional exhaustion, so I'm just going to go past that. Now I'm going to say how to respond. I want you to trust your truth. They are deflecting responsibility. Your feelings and experiences are valid. Learn to set boundaries. And you can take baby steps. Like I said, just saying, I don't like it when, if you're not ready to say, if you do that the next time, I'm leaving for the weekend, or you're going to have to leave the house or whatever. I don't want you to engage with their false accusations. I want you just to say, I'm not having this conversation. Or you can say, that's your perspective, but I don't share your perspective. So this conversation is over for me, and walk away. You need to learn to have some strength to just disengage. I don't want you to engage with these crazy making conversations. It just makes you more traumatized. I talked about detaching emotionally, stay calm, stick to the facts, walk away from the interaction. Don't bring your vulnerabilities. Don't share your beliefs about don't have emotional conversations. Just think about ways to get out of the conversation. And, you can even just say, if you don't want to create a conflict, you can say, that's interesting. And then move on. I want you to seek support. Talk to trusted people or professionals. It's very difficult to heal in isolation. It's very difficult to build yourself up if you've been torn down so much. You need validation and support. A trusted therapist or safe family member or friend who is completely aligned with you, not playing neutral, because playing neutral only benefits the offender. You need somebody who really has your back. And there are online support groups that can provide that for you if you don't feel you have somebody that you can really trust. But it's really important that you get support from somewhere. Consider legal steps. Talk to an attorney before you even think about a separation. With a legal separation, rather than an informal separation, for example, it can protect your credit score if they rack up charges. So there's things for you to consider and prepare for before you set a really firm boundary that causes a separation. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're at this sort of time. I want you to recognize manipulation to maintain your sense of reality. You need to come to a place of radical acceptance about the truth, accepting that you are in fact being emotionally, financially, or sexually abused as an essential first step to overcoming it. You want to protect yourself and your physical sanity, your emotional and physical sanity, your safety, and your health. And that takes work to get strong enough. You want to embrace a healing process. And by taking our course and joining our coaching calls, you can really step into healing, or joining an online support group can be very helpful. So that's basically what I had today. I want to invite you to join our Restore coaching calls, which is a very safe and supportive space where it's an hour of your questions and answers. It's a really supportive community, and I hope that you'll join that. It's very inexpensive. I think it's $10 a month. So it's like getting therapy and support from others at a very low cost. So now I can take your questions and answers, and I can stay over a little bit.
I'm so grateful you just mentioned Restore, because I answered 11 questions. There's still 23. There's 23 plus, and there's 99 plus comments and questions in the chat. So we're going to do what we can as best as we can here in this time. But I would love, I want to just second what Annette said. Love to invite you all to our Mend Restore community. Annette, somebody here actually said, let's open up Mend clinics in every city. So I just had to share that with you.
We just need a funding source.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, thank
you for the compliment, though.
Right. It's so validating.
And thank you for being so engaged in these conversations. If we don't get to your question, please feel free to email us at info at themendproject.com. It might take me a week or so to get back to you, but I will answer your question.
Yes, that, and also please consider joining Restore, because that
Yeah.
hour, that entire hour is set aside for anybody who wants to hop in and connect directly with Annette, asking questions and sharing situations, etc.
Okay, so let's get to some questions.
Yes, yes. So, I'm just going to start at the top, and then I'm going to read through to make sure some of them have not been answered. In one of the 5 pillars of abuse, one of the pillars says faulty belief system, moralistic judgments based on limited knowledge, family system, or social bias causing oppression of others. When my mother-in-law pressures her son and I and our daughter to do things for her because, quote, we're family, then how do I respectfully disagree when we don't owe her favors? She gives us gifts, but then guilts us into paying her back later. My belief system is different because I need to not be guilted into doing things for others. I want to do it because I love them, not simply because we're family. It says, I need prayers for my relationship with my mother-in-law. Any tips, Annette, in a situation like this?
Well, yeah, I hope that your husband is on board with you, or your wife. I don't know if you're male or female, but that your partner is on board with you in setting some boundaries. I think you need to just have a conversation where you say, I don't want you to buy us gifts anymore. We don't expect gifts from you. And it's really confusing and it's difficult when then you ask for us to pay you back later. And so we're really buying what you're buying us. And maybe that's not the way we want to spend our money. So please don't, you just need to lay it out. Please don't do that anymore. Or if you buy us a gift because you want to, please don't ask us to pay you back, because we won't be doing that anymore. And just set the boundary. But you're giving her a notice up front. And then also, in terms of having you help her, I think it's okay to help our elders to some degree as they're getting older. I don't know if she really needs your help yet or not, but you can certainly set limits and say, we have 30 minutes a week that we can help you, or we have 1 hour a week that we can help you, but otherwise you're going to have to hire a handyman or do ride sharing where you get to the grocery store or what. I don't know what she's asking you to do, but you can certainly set limits to say, we have the responsibility of ourselves, our jobs, our children, and we don't have the free time to do that. So we don't want to abandon you, but there's a limit. So you can ask us for this much. Now she's going to break those boundaries. She's going to push them. And that's where it's up to you to say, I'm sorry, we already used up our hour this week. We have too much going on. Maybe next week we can get to it. And you need to just lay it out there and don't let her cause you to lower your resolve or to lower the consequences of those boundaries. Yeah, that's what I recommend.
Great. Here's another one on that, and I think you just addressed it, so I will just leave that. Somebody asked, and they said it as a statement, it would be interesting to learn why there is such a strong need to avoid accountability and responsibility. Do you want to address that, Annette?
Okay, so basically, there's someone in the previous question mentioned the pillars of abuse. The pillars of abuse are a sense of entitlement, a faulty belief system, image management. So they're trying to manage their image while they act differently behind closed doors, and a low emotional IQ. So if you consider they have a sense of entitlement, they have a faulty belief system, which an example of a faulty belief system would be patriarchy, which is so endemic in our population. But there's also families, like we just heard, where there's matriarchy. They think you owe them. So they impose responsibilities on you. Oh, wait, tell me the original question again. I lost my train of thought.
Yes, it is. It would be interesting to learn why there is such a strong need to avoid
Oh, to avoid
accountability.
accountability and responsibility. Okay, so with a low emotional IQ, that means they possibly were raised in a family where they weren't allowed to express a full array of emotions. If it's a male you're talking about, they're often allowed to express anger, but not vulnerability. There's a lot of messages to disdain feminine traits like don't run like a girl, don't cry like a girl, don't show your weakness, man up, toughen up. So they become disconnected from emotions. What they need is a parent that's going to say, well, tell me what you're feeling. Oh, I understand why you feel that way. And really validate them and say, you're so smart to recognize that. Good for you. You give them confidence in their ability to discern situations, to judge situations accurately. And when you build confidence in them, then they are comfortable with emotions. They feel like they can comprehend what's happening instead of undermining it by being emotionally unavailable or telling them they can only express certain emotions. They never develop access to those other emotions. So when a victim or survivor makes a reasonable complaint or concern and she brings her emotions to the conversation, there's like this belief system that emotions are, women are over emotional is a common one, or I'm so uncomfortable with emotions, I don't want to talk about emotions. So the offender is uncomfortable with managing his own emotions, which he never learned about. He just feels the anxiety. And he has a belief system that emotions are bad and not trustworthy. And he's probably made a million past emotional decisions that were wrong because they don't have an IQ that understands emotions and can solve internal problems within themselves. So they want to avoid being wrong. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of fear of the unknown and shame. They don't want to be wrong. So they will say and do anything to power over the conversation, to control the narrative, and to avoid admitting fault. They don't understand that if they had an intelligent emotional conversation where both people are assimilating with each other, they can actually solve problems. They look at it as a win or lose proposition. So they want to win arguments. That's the way they cope. They want to power over. They want to be angry. They want to use the emotions that they are familiar with. They don't want to be vulnerable. It scares them, and it's not in their toolbox. And they don't have empathy to appreciate your vulnerabilities. They don't even know what it is to really have a deep emotional connection. So I hope that answers it.
Great, thank you, Annette. The next question, it's a little lengthy, but it's actually not a question, but I actually find it quite important. And maybe you can address the situation for everyone to hear. It says, I have been separated from my abusive ex for about a year. He has reached out to my elderly parents and to my community during the year, but I didn't react. Now I have had a long communication from him telling me that he has aggressive cancer with awful treatments and the future looks poor for him. I don't know whether to believe him. He always blamed me for everything and never took any responsibility. He treated me without respect and had affairs and had contempt for me at the end. After initially wanting to go and see him after his email, I haven't done it. I am still so early in my recovery that I don't want to set myself back. I do think it's a play by him, but maybe I'll regret it if he does die. Do you want to speak to this, Annette?
Yeah, honestly, you need to take care of yourself first. Don't let yourself feel guilty. I would not go and see him. He is not safe, whether he's dying or not. I don't feel guilt over that. There's too high a risk of you being sucked in to more and getting really, he's not going to validate you. And if he does validate you, it's just a mask to hook you back in, and the mask will come off again. You are too fresh out of this and traumatized to be able to pour a lot of energy, which it will take to help a person with advanced stages of cancer. I know this sounds callous, but he's made his bed, and you can forgive him in your heart, like between you and God. But that doesn't mean that you need to reconcile and start taking on more responsibility for him when he never took responsibility for himself in the first place. Your number one priority is getting healthy, getting your mind clear, working on healing from trauma. You can't be good for anyone, not even yourself. It's like you have to put the oxygen mask on for yourself first. You can't take this on. So I would not allow myself to feel guilt in any way. He destroyed the relationship through his actions. You are not responsible for that. And now you guys have gone your separate way. You can say, I'm so sorry that you're going through that. I'll be praying for you, and leave it at that. Nothing more. And don't feel guilty about it. And you can pray for him, or think good thoughts for the person and wish them the best. But I would not, if then he writes a thing and says, well, I need someone to come with me to the doctor, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to be able to help you with that. You'll have to find somebody else. Just be firm. It's perfectly okay to take care of yourself. I hope that doesn't seem harsh, but sometimes we have to make difficult decisions.
Yeah, thank you, Annette.
Yeah.
Okay, this next question. How do I protect myself if my abuser is trying to collect evidence against me? He makes up and tells me to my face that I've done horrible things that are totally untrue. Like he's trying to add it to the narrative. How does my record/notes of his harm against me and the kids differ to the courts if he's willing to make things up? I can't leave because I don't trust that he won't harm the kids when I'm not around.
Oh, you're in a bind, and I'm so sorry. I would start recording him unbeknownst to him. I would get whatever evidence that you can. I would take really good notes, with dates and times, and like locations. He was at the kid's school on so-and-so date and time, and created a scene or didn't show up to pick them up on this date and time. I would start I would start communicating in writing with him and saving those communications. Like if it's text, save the text in a file so you don't have to compile them all later if you go to court, or save your emails, and start putting everything in writing so that there is a paper trail about what happened. Anything you can get from him on recording would be great. And work so hard on yourself to not be reactive, to emotionally disengage and limit your conversations. I would see an attorney. I would possibly talk to a domestic violence agency where they have advocates, where you can get an escape plan, where you know what documents you need to be getting copies of now: birth certificates, passports, financial documents, a spare set of keys, some cash that you've put away. I would possibly consider taking half the money out of the bank account, so that, because they're not going to, it sounds like he's not going to pay you, and you might think he will, but he's going to avoid it. And so talk to an attorney, but I would be very shrewd, very calculated in how you proceed. I hope that helps.
Great. Thank you, Annette. All right. I have recorded many conversations with my partner to be able to reflect back on what each of us said and our reactions, because he would often tell me something was said or said in a way that it was not. So to understand what was really going on, but then I worry as I do not want to record really, but I struggle without it to know reality. Does this make me abusive?
No. I mean, it's illegal in some states to record without somebody's knowledge, but you're fighting for your sanity. And it's important to be able to understand what's happening. But I just want to caution you to not, once you understand that this is what's happening, manipulation and emotional abuse, I don't want you to get so mired down in recording and replaying the recordings and just all that minutia and stress to replay. Once you've gathered the data, believe the data to be true and move on to the next phases of your healing. I really encourage you to take our course because it will stop the ruminating. It will give you so much clarity, and graduates regularly report that the course saved them about a year of traditional therapy. You won't need to process through all that stuff. That will be accomplished in this 4-module course, and you will be done with that. And then you can start working on, okay, now how do I want to cope moving forward? Do I want to learn how to stay in this relationship, or do I want to learn how to leave this relationship, and what kind of healing I need to be working on to get my strength built up? Right now, you're so beaten down, and I just don't want to see you over functioning and exhausting yourself on this minutia. I want you to get the clarity that you need. But this course will also give you clarity without you being stuck in the minutia of the nuances of your specific situation. So by all means, record if you feel like you need to prove what really happened. But once you gather that data, believe what you see. It's your responsibility to believe what you learn and then start moving on. Don't keep doing it over and over again unless there's something critical that you need proof of. That's what I recommend.
Great. Thank you, Annette. The next question, what if the abuser also has what I suspect, anxiety disorders, anger issues, and neurodivergence? Because I don't think my husband is always aware of the harm he's inflicting upon me or my family and friends. It's like he's at capacity and can't control his behaviors.
Well, does he act this way at work?
That's a fabulous question in response. That shows a level of being able to control behaviors. So that is fantastic thinking.
He is entitled. He might be neurodivergent to a point. He might have anger issues. It's his responsibility to get those anger issues under control and to be in therapy or to be reading books and to be listening to podcasts and doing the work. He can't leave his anger issues to impact other people. That's unacceptable. There's no excuse for that. So he's an adult. He has a responsibility to take responsibility for himself. He might not understand fully how abusive or impactful his behaviors are, but he knows enough to know he has a problem that needs to be worked on. And that should be enough to motivate. A healthy person would be motivated to say, I'm impacting other people. I need to get my act together. I need to figure out what this is. You don't just keep doing it over and over again. And they can control more than you think. He's just entitled and feels really comfortable, in my opinion, acting out around people that he knows won't believe him. I mean, he knows that his job, if he does that, he might lose his job. I don't know. He has a responsibility to get well. Even if it's neurodivergence, it's get tested and figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are and what your capabilities are. Be responsible and get to the bottom of that stuff.
Great. Annette, how do you recommend discontinuing couples counseling that's already in progress and problematic?
I would say I would probably ask to speak to the therapist alone in your own session if they'll allow it. If they won't allow it, I would say, if you don't allow that, then I don't feel emotionally safe because there are things that I can't say in front of my husband, and I need to feel safe in order to move forward. And this isn't a safe environment for me, so I'll be terminating. And you just simply tell your husband, this therapist is not skilled in our behavior, in our dynamics. We're not getting the help that we need, and I'm terminating. And just be frank about it. Or he or she, like, you can ask them, you can ask the therapist, how many continuing education units have you had on the subject of emotional abuse or domestic violence? Ask them. I bet you it's very little. Ask them how many continuing education units they have on narcissistic abuse and find out. And then if you are allowed to have your own session with them, I would print out the terms and definitions and the pillars of abuse and the maze of confusion. I would bring that to your session and explain to the therapist that their skill set is not identifying these behaviors. And with everything that you've learned through our organization and where else you've learned, that before anything else can be addressed, abuse needs to be confronted and resolved, or the rest just gets distorted. Like I said, 10% of the problem being placed on you is treated as though it's 100% of the problem. You may need to confront your therapist, but in a kind and respectful way. Say, thank you for trying to help us, but I feel like our problems need somebody who is more highly trained in this area, who's an expert in this area. And you have every right. It's your money to choose who you see and who you don't see.
Yes.
In fact, I want to refer you to a blog article we have for how to choose a therapist. So when you move on, or even if you're talking to your therapist, you can ask them the questions that we've laid out for you in this blog article so that you can be equipped to ask the right questions and basically put the therapist on notice that they don't have the right answers. And you're not attacking them. We all can't be experts in every area. So, and even if the therapist says, I've been working with couples for 30 years, then you can say, well, how many couples has there been narcissistic abuse where you've confronted it and fully supported the victim experiencing it? How do you handle narcissistic abuse when it comes up? How often do you experience it? Because I guarantee you it should be like 40% of the time, because it's an epidemic. And if they have very little experience or they haven't intervened, then, and another question you could ask is, when you recognize that it's narcissistic abuse, do you refer them out to an expert in that area? But go to the blog article and you'll see a bunch.
So good. And a question came in about an hour ago from a therapist. And so now it's like the perfect timing to ask you this. Hopefully this person is still here. I know we're over time. The question is, therapist here. Thank you for the insight on couples therapy. What would your advice be to us therapists and counselors that are looking to work with couples in such situations?
Well, you have to not work with a couple you have to refer the abuser out to an expert. And I recommend the Marriage Recovery Center, Dr. David Hawkins. They're also called the Emotional Abuse Institute. These people have really, they're very experienced. This is all they deal with for the most part. So as a therapist, I would say I can work with the victim, and you can write to me and I can share with you like the stages and steps that victims and survivors need to go through to really find themselves again, to heal. You can work with one party, and you could collaborate with a place like the Marriage Recovery Center, but you can't do couples therapy. It's very, there's too many risks of really re-traumatizing the survivor in those situations. And you have to have a lot of, I'm going to sound crude for a second, a lot of balls to deal with an abuser, because and a lot of knowledge, and be able to juggle a lot of balls in the air at the same time because of how confusing and manipulative it is, and how many justifications they have, how they don't tell you the whole story, how they falsely accuse. There's so many components that make it really hard work. You have to really decide if that's what you want to do. But if you want to learn more about that, we do have a continuing education course through the American Psychological Association, and I teach it with Dr. Hawkins, and you get 9.5 hours towards your licensure. Next.
Yes. Okay.
This will be the last one.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, then before we address it, there are 18 unanswered and over 150 comments in the chat, and I have not been able to see all of them. I want you to know, Annette, I've been answering as many questions.
I wish I could stay on longer, but I have to take my grandson to his school.
I know. We love this space. That's why we actually created the coaching community, because it really is a need.
And email me your questions. I will answer them.
Yes.
info@themendproject.com.
Okay. Oh, goodness. Let's see. People are asking what the support group is called. It's called Restore, and it's on. You can find it on our website in our trainings, training and curriculum section. Let me see here. Yes, we do offer CEU credits for therapists. You can also find that under our courses on our website as well. If you need more information, please reach out to us at info@themendproject.com, and we can connect you to the course. Let's see.
Yeah, it's also on our tools and resources page.
Okay, I don't know how I pick one. I'm like, how do I pick one? This one, here we go. This is more original, I think, than the other ones, in the sense that you've probably addressed around the other questions. This one says, when I tell what has been done, everyone seems to ask me to explain the reason for their behavior. Like, well, why would he do that, etc. Could you please address this frustrating expectation to explain abusive behavior?
Oh my goodness. I went through this so much back in the day. First off, I don't want you to share your situation with people who are not safe, who understand, who get it, and who are not fully supporting you. You don't need that kind of traumatic interaction. That's traumatic when they want to know the details of why. Why would he do that? Well, because he is an offender, because he has a faulty belief system, a sense of entitlement, image management, and a low emotional IQ. They're not going to even understand what that means. And so I would just start learning how to disengage and say, I'm just not going to talk about it. I know it's happening, and that needs to be enough. It's very complicated and confusing, and it would take me an hour to explain so that you would see the patterns, and I just don't have the energy to do that. So right now I'm just not discussing it. Something like that. You don't owe them anything. If there's somebody who's a really good listener and they want to know, the best tool is the terms and definitions and the maze of confusion, where you sit down and you have the terms circled. He blame shifts me, he minimizes me, he gaslights me, this or she, whoever you're talking about. And you just list all the behaviors and say, the way this has impacted me over the last few years is, and you show them the maze of confusion. I couldn't even remember what started the argument in the first place because all I got was stonewalling, roadblocks everywhere, and aggression. And it was so crazy making and confusing. And if they say, well, why do you think he does this? I don't know. That's for him to have to work out, but I'm just trying to heal myself. And I can't take his problems on top of all the damage that he's caused me. That's my capacity. Or I don't know. I'm working on understanding that and don't talk about it. That's what I would do. You don't owe them anything, but I really want you to be careful who you're confiding in. You don't need support from people who aren't capable of giving it to you. That is going to be too traumatizing to try to get it. You need support from people who really believe in you, who are not going to trigger you and question you and interrupt you. Well, have you tried this? Well, have you tried that? You don't need that kind of interaction. You need someone that's going to be a really good listener, who's going to validate you and say, you have every reason to feel that way. I'm so sorry you're going through this. I believe in you. You're in a tough season, but you're going to get through this. They know how to say all the right things. If you want to know the right things to be said, if you go to our tools and resources page, we have something called the Healing Model of Compassion that teaches people how to interface with survivors who are disclosing their story. It's a very finite set of ways that you communicate with a survivor so that it doesn't re-traumatize them. Maybe you have a therapist, or maybe you have a pastor, or maybe you have a friend, and they're open enough to hearing you say, this is what I need right now. I don't need questions. I don't need other things off this list. I just need these things. It's a tool for that. Okay, well, I hope that helps. I'm so grateful for all of your questions. And if you felt like your question wasn't handled in one of the other answers and we didn't get to you, please feel free to email us. And I'm sorry that I couldn't stay over longer, but I'm so grateful that you're here and that everybody was so engaged. It makes it so much more dynamic and a better learning situation for everyone. I'll read through your comments when this is over, after I'm done taking my grandson to school. And I just look forward to next time. So please join us on our Restore coaching call and on our next workshop. In the meantime, take really good care of yourself. Bye-bye.